Hello, everybody, and welcome back to those of you who've been with us throughout the day, and welcome to folks joining from wherever you are on the planet. It's early afternoon here in Minnesota, and we're so glad you've joined us for World Health Day 2021, with our focus on equity and equality. And we've been hearing opportunities and ways and perspectives from all angles, from big companies and small nonprofits and the larger structures that we face in our society. We're going to turn our attention now to learning from each other, because we know that the work of achieving equity, and we know that we have to achieve that at the global level if we're going to get in front of the variants that could overtake us and push us back to the beginning of the pandemic. But if we're going to be making that kind of progress rapidly, we have to do it by helping each other and learning from each other. I'm really thrilled to be able to invite to our panel for this session people that are making this happen in the real world around the planet. Some of you know what a success Rwanda has been in terms of really public health, population health, just incredible control of the COVID situation. But on many things, Rwanda just really stands out in front. But it takes infrastructure and it takes planning to do that. And our first panel member this afternoon, Ali Diallo, founder and general partner at United Capital. He's been a telecom entrepreneur and a visionary working with others to create what they call the next billion users. Their work in bringing the 5G broadband to Rwanda is one of the most exciting projects. It's going to really make a difference in terms of taking down one of the key barriers to healthcare. And Rwanda is a country that has always stayed on the front edge. And Ali will be joined by one of his technology partners, CEO of Nexedi, Jean-Paul Smets, to share about this exciting work that they are doing there in Rwanda and around the world, and hopefully soon here in the United States, where we have our own struggles in meeting the broadband needs they're crucial for taking care of our own healthcare issues. Ali, thank you so much for joining us, and please share with us your story of the progress and what you're doing in Rwanda and around the world.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me. First of all, I'm very humbled to be here. I'm very grateful. This is a great panel, a great event, and certainly needed in these times. And yes, so I'm one of the co-founders of United Capital, which is a global impact organization. We're based in Washington, D.C., operating in about 20 different countries and in several sectors, from renewable energy to telecom to telehealth as well. And Rwanda has been one of our key focus from the very, very beginning, and for good reasons. The country is at the forefront of the digital health revolution, as some of you already know. It's one of those markets that really succeeded in the fight against COVID-19. And in our case, we found great partners, local partners in Rwanda to collaborate with to really scale not only digital health, but also, on a much broader scale, broadband. And Rwanda has been the first country in the world to implement a national universal healthcare service, digital only, right? Which is pretty unique for a country in sub-Saharan Africa. It's also the first country in the world to deploy a medical supply using commercial drones, right? And the country has been very committed when it comes to supporting broadband, right? And we know that there is a direct correlation between broadband and healthcare as well, especially now, in those pandemic days. And, President Kagame is actually, I believe he's still the chair of the Broadband Commission for Sustainable Development, which is affiliated with the ITU. And the government has been spending, more than $100 million to support fiber infrastructure. So in our case, at United Capital, we felt the need to be involved and to support local communities. And we partnered with a local telecom operator, a Rwandan telecom operator, to really deploy a 5G ready network, a broadband network, not only in the city, in Kigali, but beyond that, in all the remote areas as well. So the project is currently ongoing. We've been in collaboration and we've been collaborating with the national regulator, and we recently received a spectrum to deploy the network. So we're working on the details currently. The end goal here is to not only support 5G, down the road in terms of deployments, but also provide a low-cost access, right? So right now, with the technology that we have, which is called vRAN, which is used by some of the largest telecom operators, but also telecom providers such as Ericsson, Nokia, and so forth. So the technology really allows, a low-cost deployment for wireless infrastructure, right? And in our case, because we're an impact-driven organization, we're able to pass on that saving onto customers, onto the end users. So that's the end game here. And once we have this infrastructure in place, right, the idea is to have additional layers of content deployed, such as telemedicine, infotainment, and mobile financial services as well. I'm not sure if Mark can hear me, but I can share a little bit more about Bluetel. Yeah,
please do. Yeah.
Okay, great. So as I was saying, so our group is called United Capital, and what we do is we really support local communities, but also organizations and even government agencies when it comes to deploying a broadband network and different solutions. And one of our portfolio companies is called Bluetel, which is a wireless infrastructure provider. And we were scaling the operations here in the US and across sub-Saharan Africa. One of the key projects that we have is called UBA, Universal Broadband Access. And the end goal here is to really support, communities, not only, in Africa, but also here in the US, minorities, to have access to a better broadband service. So here in the US, we're targeting the African-American community and also the native Indian community in the Midwest, in the South as well. And across sub-Saharan Africa, as I mentioned, we're working in Rwanda. We also have other West African markets that we're planning on penetrating as well. And this is a unique time for connectivity, right? Because of what happened with the pandemic. This is a unique opportunity to really leverage, such a technology, which is open source, by the way. So it's not a proprietary technology, and that's the beauty of it. Because once you deploy it, you can have additional content providers providing all different types of content. So to go back to Rwanda, one of the key things that we saw, I mentioned the Universal Primary Healthcare Platform. So what the country did is they partnered with a UK-based healthcare organization, and I believe the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was also involved. And they came up with a way to create a national AI-powered telehealth platform, right? And if you look at how Africa is structured, right, a lot of the solutions, the services are now mobile only. So the platform is actually a mobile platform that allows anybody in Rwanda to have access to telehealth, telemedicine services. So anybody that's in a remote area could just take their phone and schedule meetings with doctors, have access to consultations, and doctors would be able to provide real-time feedback. And beyond that, even have patient monitoring, which is sort of unique. So it's the first country in the world to have implemented such a service at a national level. And the goal for us is to support such initiatives along the way.
And Jean-Paul, you're partnering with this. Can you give us a picture of how this fits together with the other technological kind of change and the fast pace that this COVID pandemic has created?
I will try to give you a few very practical examples. I actually even brought some hardware to show you and to show that it's not only abstract things, but super easy and practical things we are discussing. So I'll try to share. It seems it should work. So, of course, we all know that there is telemedicine. I don't know if you know, but for example, just like in Rwanda, All doctors now are available through video conferencing in France through a mobile phone application. But what is maybe less known is, I don't know if you've seen this device. It's something you plug on your phone and turns your phone into a COVID testing device. Have you ever heard that? Maybe no interaction. So, and maybe you've heard also an Israeli company that has made a smartphone application. You just cough on your phone and it tells you if you have COVID. For all this to work, you need, of course, infrastructure. And people very often believe that making a telecommunication network is something complicated. Actually, it is not. You just need to purchase PCs like the ones you see on this presentation. Then you run a software inside. The one we use is called Amarisoft. Then we plug the PC to some kind of amplifier. It's not a sound amplifier, but a radio frequency amplifier. And we get a 4G and 5G network. So overall, a PC, a software, and an amplifier. That's enough. If you want to look a bit more in details, then the way we will deploy it is with something called smart glasses and artificial reality. We ship the hardware like we would ship IKEA furniture with procedures. We then ask people to put smart glasses, and then we can remotely help the person with the smart glasses to set up the network. And just by doing so, after some time, we get a result that looks like this and provides 4G or 5G network. This is in France's countryside, but it will be very soon the same in Rwanda. So deploying networks is with vRAN has become something extremely easy. And for example, I just brought one. This is a PC I have in my home. It's just a PC and it brings a 5G network in my home. So deploying networks nowadays has become essentially not more difficult than deploying Wi-Fi, because you just need to run some software on a PC and you get a 5G radio system. So that's all.
Jean-Paul, well, so thank you so much for giving us this visual, this understanding that we are able to leapfrog technology. Sometimes we talk about that. You're talking about bringing to Rwanda the most advanced to aid their ability to stay on the cutting edge so that the rest of us can learn from Rwanda and from other countries. And thank you so much for bringing that.
And they are more advanced sometimes because they already got their fears out. They don't need to outsource. They just do grassroots with their own hands. And this will make it so easy to get 5G deployed there, actually, sometimes faster than in France or Germany.
Well, so our next guest, Niousha Roshani, one of the co-founders of Global Black Youth, has been specializing in bringing webinars and conferences and big explosive events together to see the technology and the innovation that's coming from all over the planet, but also to talk about the ways that people can exchange and support each other. Niousha, thank you so much for taking time. I think you're coming from Africa and you're middle of the late in the day for you, most likely, but we so appreciate both the inspiration from Global Black Youth, but also the work that you're doing to bring that knowledge that is in our communities everywhere into a more general and socially aware place so that all of us can be better, faster in this way. Thank you for that. And please share with us your story.
Thank you very much, Mark. And thank you for Global Minnesota for putting together such an important event and having these spaces to really discuss and try to include very fast, some of the knowledge that's being produced by very much overlooked and underinvested populations. So in this case, I'm the co-founder of Global Black Youth. We connect into the most cutting edge solution generated by Black youth on a global scale. And by global, I really mean from the Pacific to Latin America to the Americas in general to the African continent to Europe Middle East, as the African diaspora is everywhere in the world. We try to bring to the fore some of their knowledge and really disrupt those grim stats of underinvestment, of funding, solutions, opportunities, knowledge into Black founders. We see that as missed opportunities. So as we move forward, and I don't disqualify the efforts of diversity and inclusion, but it's just a surface cover up. It's so much more than this. We're missing out. We're in revenue and in knowledge through our current global crisis that could further our efforts, and we are using only a fraction of our capacity, of our global capacity. So we really try to use a decolonized, a decentralized approach to innovation. When we think about innovation, that's really important to address our critical needs, to research, to business policies, to practices, or anything that's related to our well-being, and to be able to harness the full potential of innovation that growth and minimize harm. We at the same time, like I said, we see the correlation. We at the same time, like I said, we see the correlation between economic crisis and the underinvestment into Black founders. That threatens the ecosystem of the accelerators, the incubators, and especially in the global South, that are often overlooked. That can, that basically foster that health system, we try to connect and really foster a global community, not just to each other. So, for example, connecting some of the fantastic work that they're doing in Rwanda with some of the fantastic work that they're doing by Black communities in Colombia, with what's happening in Brazil, with what's happening in South Africa and Australia and New Zealand, so they can learn from each other, connect to each other, inspire, collaborate with each other, but also really establish that pipeline where it doesn't exist, or widen the pipeline to industries and to policymakers, to these knowledge producers. So that's in a nutshell what we're doing at the moment. I'm not sure if there's any specific questions, Mark, that you wanted to ask or for me to focus on, but I can give some specific examples of, Ali did a fantastic job of kind of stating what's happening in Rwanda. We have, very similar examples in other parts of the world. But
yes. And I go to your website to get inspired by the stories that you've included there. Give us some of those specifics.
No, that's fine. I mean, so just a quick stat. I mean, and this is an understatement, but just, about 13% of the technological innovations that happen in response to the COVID-19 pandemic were pioneered on the African continent. Again, that's a very large understatement. I'm sure it's much more than this. I'm positive of that. But because of those dominant narratives that we have, because in our global imaginaries, we cannot perceive that these valuable knowledge can emerge out of the African continent or Latin America, we're missing out. We're not even considering it. And I think that's why it took us so long to be able to get to where we are. So two of the things that we did last year, and this is how we met Mark, and I'm so glad for this introduction, is that we grew very much tired of the negative perception in the media that was expecting for this apocalypse to happen on the African continent, the disproportionate impact of the pandemic on Black population. But there's really nothing that was harnessing and that was really highlighting the knowledge that were produced by these young innovators in the global South. And we decided to hold a series of webinars, and that was the first ones, looking at what is it that young Black people in the global South are doing in health and innovation? What is it that they're doing to mitigate the economic impact? How is it that they're even with the threat to basically wipe out all the SMEs on the continent and Latin America, how is it that they're bypassing this? And what is it they're doing in terms of misinformation that was threatening also the efforts to mitigate the pandemic? From this, there was a really growing need to bring together a much larger number of innovators and entrepreneurs together. We held our Global Black Youth Fest, which is our annual summit. We brought together about 2,000 young Black innovators over 2 days around topics, from AI and machine learning to innovation in health and sciences to female-led technologies, capital and access to capital entrepreneurship, and a wide array of topics. And that was the first time that we're able to bring together somebody, like a policymaker like David Lammy, who is one of the few Black MPs of the UK, in conversation with young innovators and environmental activists from Jamaica, an entrepreneur from Kenya, in conversation with an impact investor from the US. And it was fascinating to them because they never had these cross-regional, intersectoral, and intergenerational conversations. We also held demo days to really try to disrupt, like I said, those underinvestment and those really grim stats of 0.3% funding that goes into Black female founders, or the less than 1% of funding that goes into Black founders in the US. I mean, the numbers are just so ridiculous, actually. And so we really try to connect them and show basically businesses and corporations, but beyond just business corporation, policymakers, what they're missing out on by not tapping into the knowledge and the efforts of young Black people on a global scale.
I know that you're planning a founders conference coming up relatively soon. What was the motivation to really kind of create that new forum that you're working on right now?
Like I said, it's just as there was a need. So we're doing several things. We're launching next week the Black Entrepreneurs Club to have a space where we can have semi-structured pitches by young Black innovators and entrepreneurs to an ecosystem of founders, of bankers and funders and investors, and to really be able to bridge that gap, and really disrupt those grim stats I was discussing. We're also creating a platform to really showcase some of the most high caliber Black entrepreneurs, and really bring them to the fore and really bring visibility to the work that they're doing. Like I said, it's just as we have these conversations, and as we, for example, we interact with the Black entrepreneurship ecosystem in the US, they're highly surprised to know that these kind of cutting edge enterprise that take place in Brazil or in Colombia or in South Africa or in less, of the usual suspect African countries, in Senegal, which is a booming ecosystem. I'm in Cape Verde at the moment, and Cape Verde is actually, really up and coming. And very few people have that notion of Cape Verde, unfortunately. So it's the work that we want to do to really bring that knowledge from the global South, and then so we can learn from here to the rest of the world, rather than having that, the top-down approach from the North to the South.
And our friend Ali, who is focusing on the infrastructure. Ali, I wonder, this is your experience that you've been able to see that Rwanda and many other places, with the proper infrastructure, then it becomes possible to hyper and really put a booster rocket on innovation, on entrepreneurship. And it seems like you're having a lot of success with that in your impact firm.
Yeah. So to piggyback on what Niousha said, the key is, beyond the infrastructure is really to be able to support the ecosystem, right? We use an inclusive innovation model, which is modeled after MIT's inclusive innovation ecosystem, right? So the whole idea for us is not just to deploy an infrastructure, but to make sure that we empower local communities, local entrepreneurs, local corporates, even governments, agencies. We work a lot with a lot of agencies. So the goal is to empower them and do a lot of knowledge transfer so that once the infrastructure layer is put in place, we can have an ecosystem that actually bubbles out of this infrastructure, right? So when you look at telecom, for us, putting together the actual infrastructure to enable 5G across multiple communities this is just the first step, right? The real opportunity, the real value is when we're able to open this ecosystem so that anybody to Niousha's point, anybody that has a startup idea or innovation, right, would be able to tap into this infrastructure and deploy their own solution. Because, as a global organization, we're based in Washington, D.C. We have around 20 venture partners scattered around multiple geographies, from Jordan to France to Sub-Saharan Africa to Canada. We cannot really know, or we cannot even pretend to know all the challenges that, specific communities or nations around the world, have to deal with, right? So our key for us is really to empower local leaders, local impact leaders, community leaders, entrepreneurs, because they know the challenges that their countries are facing much, much better, right? So we see ourselves as an enabler, right? As opposed to an actual, principal driver of change. We want to create and foster that ecosystem, but we really want to support and empower local communities. And the governments have a lot to play, in that ecosystem, just like entrepreneurs, and investors as well, right? The key for us, when you look at the technology sector, and we do the same thing in energy, in private equity, in fintech as well. Right. So when you look at the telecom sector, when we want to build an ecosystem around it, the first step for us was really to help that baseline and create that infrastructure layer. That's why we started with Bluetel. And once we have it deployed, that's when we would be able to onboard a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of startups, innovation-driven companies, and have them, deploy the services that their countries need, right? Rwanda, for instance, did not wait for anybody to, tell them, what would be the best solution to, solving the pandemic, right? And when you look at Rwanda, I think the country had so far 300 deaths, from COVID. It's 300 too many, but it's still a much better number than other countries. And I think there are around 20,000 reported cases so far, right? So the country did not wait for anybody to implement this national pandemic plan or the digital the AI powered platform that I had mentioned. So they knew exactly what the challenges were, right? And they were able to implement it much better than if another company had to come in. So we were very, very mindful of the needs and the cultural sensitivities and the realities of each market we penetrate. We have a very inclusive approach. That's actually why we're called United Capital. We work with a lot of stakeholders, not just deploying an infrastructure network and then leaving. So I think that's the key, especially if you want to drive impact at that level and create some sort of ecosystem that goes beyond just one solution having a monopoly in an industry. That's actually why the technology that we chose is an open source technology with Jean-Paul and Amarisoft as well in the backend. It's open source, so anybody can once we deploy the network, anybody can add any types of services, and there is a lot of security tied to it. And when we go in a country like Rwanda or Ghana or Senegal, I'm actually originally from Senegal, so I know Francophone Africa very well as well. And when we go to those countries, we try to work with local stakeholders, right? So we look at the telecom operators, we talk to government agencies, and whatever is already in place, instead of just disrupting it, our goal for us is to serve as a catalyst to really amplify the impact that those local solutions have been having.
Well, Niousha, I can imagine that there is conversation about the sort of disparity globally on the availability and the rollout of the vaccine, and there are innovations taking place. And South Africa has been, at least at the World Trade Organization, really pushing hard to get the waiver that's been promised but not delivered, so they can be generating through their own pharmaceutical system and their own manufacturing system. What do you see from your perspective in Global Black Youth about the innovations that might help the whole planet get to some kind of a more universal immunization and vaccination through the efforts of young entrepreneurs?
Thank you, Mark. So just to take from, because it's very much all linked, just to take from what Ali was saying, when we think about, as he was talking, I was thinking that, for example, one of the efforts that we're trying to do is really trying to strengthen and that knowledge sharing, a South-South knowledge sharing, because we saw that during the pandemic, even before the pandemic, that knowledge that we're trying to adapt from the global North to the global South was not where right? Our quarantine measures, the reality was just not feasible in these places. But it comes a way that the same way that we think about innovation as well. And like I said before, what we're trying to do is really decolonizing innovation. The way that we measure innovation, that we perceive and understand innovation needs to be centralized and decolonized. And like I always say, the most innovation that I've seen was not stemming, out of the Silicon Valley or Berlin or London. It was Cuba was one of the most innovative places I've ever been in my life, because it's the cradle of innovation is necessity. So we've always been innovative as a humankind. So it's become a buzzword, but it's just something that we have to do. We have to be creative in order to meet our needs. So I think that a lot of the issues that we're facing, because we're not investing into these local innovations that are much more, adequate to respond to those local needs. We're not harnessing that knowledge that can address our most, our global concern, our most pressing issues. When it comes to, the example South Africa is great, but I think the fact that we're trying to hold on to a patent, an international patent around the vaccine, but also not tapping into that local knowledge is hampering the way that we're addressing. And then for that knowledge and those responses to the pandemic, to health issues to be fully harnessed and maximized. I'm sorry I'm going into circles to respond to this, but for me, it all comes to the same issue, that the much greater issue at the center, at the core of the way that we're approaching this.
I've been very impressed to kind of follow the news and to know that in general, Africa and Asia have done very well in protecting their citizens and protecting the whole planet as a result around COVID. The Americas and Europe, very unsuccessful in general, but also that there's been more developments that have become, I would say, public recently about some of the early planning, like among for example, the United Arab Emirates beginning to redeploy their big aircraft to make sure there was transportation for protective gear and for vaccine, and just things that people have been thinking about in general. Does it feel like, from all of your perspective, Jean-Paul, Ali, Niousha, that we can bring the learnings from this period, the so-called Great Pause, which seems to me like is the great learning. Can we bring these learnings together somehow at the moment through Zoom or these electronic communication, so that we are really able to support each other in building back better, as everybody is, prone to saying, at least now at this moment?
I can go first if Jean-Paul and Niousha allows it. I totally agree. And I like how you framed it, Mark, the great learning. I think this has to be the key way to define what we've been through, right? And at United Capital, that's what we focus on, right? It might seem strange that we sometimes operate in places like Sub-Saharan Africa and emerging markets, while still being based in the US, in DC. But there is a method to our madness, right? There is a reason for it, and the key reason for us is to be that bridge, right? I'm an American entrepreneur. I've built startups and companies, in Silicon Valley, in Vegas, in DC, but I'm also from Africa originally, right? So I just like so many other diaspora members, I sort of embody that bridge between different cultures, different communities, and different geographies. And throughout my life, I've seen that there is an opportunity to learn from each other, right? So being based in DC is really key for us in the US, because we're somehow operating as a bridge between the US and Africa, and Jordan, where we have also a great presence, right? So being able to create that environment, right, an ecosystem that enables multiple cultures, multiple markets to learn from each other is key here in this world, especially in a post-pandemic world, right? What we try to do on our end, we've been documenting every learning opportunity and every mishaps, right? Every mistake that we've made, and we made a lot of them. At the height of the crisis, we had an office that we opened in India, for instance, another one in Senegal, and we had to shut down some of those offices because of the crisis, right? We had some of our portfolio companies that did well, right, especially in the telecom and fintech space, right? But others that did not do so well, right? So we try to aggregate and document all of that, right, based on the geographies we operate, and we try to make sure that we share that knowledge with other portfolio companies, but also other stakeholders. And I think that that's a key element of the new landscape, in this world, right? We need to be able to create that open learning environment, for all communities and for all stakeholders, so that we could learn from each other. I don't know if Niousha or Jean-Paul want to add anything.
It's hard to go after you, Ali, but I'll let Jean-Paul go, and I'll go after Jean-Paul.
Right. Okay, thank you, Niousha. So I would say from Europe and our terrible failure, what we were forced to learn is how to teach others things that we used to teach by traveling. And we came with a new idea. We call it open service. It's not open source, it's open service, where if we want, for example, to implement remotely at 3,000 kilometers away a service like a water distribution, cloud computing, telecom, whichever, then we are forced to define very precise procedures. Then we have to provide the freedom to people who are far away to learn how the service is made, to learn how to copy how the service was made, and to learn how to operate the same service based on the same bill of material or based on the same procedures. And this idea of open service would probably have never emerged if we hadn't been forced to stay home and not to move, and have to have people far, far away do very complicated things, which are not just about building furniture, but providing a service. And I think this will be, I would say, the most positive outcome of this crisis. For the rest, I think it's still too early to learn what happened. Personally, I don't think it's Asia or Africa versus US and Europe, but it's communist countries and underdeveloped countries versus developed countries, where developed countries fail and communist countries or developing countries succeed. And we'll have probably to learn a lot, maybe in a year or two.
Thank you, Jean-Paul. So I would say that, so I think it's a flawed perception that the more developed an economy, the more, it innovates. Like I was saying before that, it's just the way that we think and that we perceive innovation. I think one of the things that, so similar to Ali, I'm also a US citizen. I'm also from the Ivory Coast, West Africa. I've lived in Latin America for a very long time, so I consider myself Latin American as well. And you become a connector and you realize that the only way to really respond in a sustainable way, in order for us to reach any of the SDGs, the same way that we failed at the Millennium Goals to meet them, we're going to fail at meeting the SDGs unless we shift the way that we think, unless we really decolonize the way that we think about innovation and entrepreneurship, technology, and we really democratize the process. So, and by that, I mean that the way that we think about it, right? So we put value to certain regions of the world and less or higher value, depending where it comes from. So I would say that one thing that came positive out of this, it basically, one that it put in the whole innovation realm, it really put the innovation in the African continent and Latin America in high gear because they could not rely on the governments, right? In Colombia and Brazil, they could not rely on the government. So despite everything that's happening and very, very, very sad numbers in Brazil that has the second largest death rate after the US, is still the entrepreneurship ecosystem is still thriving, is still booming, especially of Black women entrepreneurs. There's a lot of health tech that emerged just last year that really grew. The knowledge sharing of the South-South knowledge sharing has also strengthened over 2020 and continue in 2021. So that's the part I think that really has helped to put to the fore and bring and shift the way that we think about knowledge, and not just a one-way pipeline, but a multi-directional pipeline where we learn from each other and then where we value that knowledge. So, from the way that, for example, they use AI and machine learning, for example, and to really bring about quality healthcare in Ghana, to the way that they use AI to harvest water, clean water from water reservoirs in the Congo. That could be, for example, a response to the drought issue in California. But because of those dominant narratives that we have about Africa and Black communities in general, we're not able to see that knowledge as valuable. And the only way that we move forward is that if we really disrupt those dominant narratives, the way that we think about it. So that's the way I see forward. And I'm hoping that because of everything that we have faced during the pandemic, we are able to disrupt, the old ways and not the business as usual, and then really adopt not even a new normal, just adopt. Yeah, I don't like the word normal, but we have to also take into account, and I appreciate what Ali is doing, the fact that data is still the most expensive on the African continent. That has to change, right? We still have 50% of the population that's not connected digitally. So these are realities that we still have to face. And even though we value the work that we do at Global Black Youth, we also understand that we're only able to reach those who have those, the privileges to be able to access and produce that knowledge and be on those digital platforms.
So each of you brought a very positive perspective because you've been seeing it before the COVID pandemic, kind of took over, and you see the other side. Do you have a picture of, let's say, Jean-Paul suggested that this set of circumstances, being stuck in one place, wanting to provide services thousands of miles away, that there is a new way of approaching the work that is addressing disparities and historic colonization? Is there a new way of being colleagues with each other on a global scale that you can imagine coming out of this?
I can add a quick word on it, real quick. I definitely agree. I think that there is a way to reinvent, the workspace, the actual way of collaborating. From the very early on, very early stage, United has been collaborating with a lot of different stakeholders and partners around the world. So we have 20 venture partners and around 50 global advisors. And for us, the key is really to, again, going back to that, empowerment, the key is to recognize the value that each one brings to the table and figure out a way to really ignite that value, right? And we're very open, very unstructured in the way we harvest talent, right? And opportunities for impact. Right. The key for us is to really support our advisors, our collaborators, even our competitors. We see ourselves as an ecosystem enabler, right? And leveraging technologies, such as remote technologies, such as Zoom, such as remote training, we were able to really empower a lot of leaders, right? Because we really believe that everybody has something to offer, right? And that's the way forward, in my personal opinion. I think that's how the world and companies will start evolving. The closed loop environment is really not working. COVID-19 showed it, to all of us. We need to think strategically about how to be more open, not just metaphorically, but really, systematically, right? And that's where the world is moving forward, towards a more open society, leveraging what you call the great learning.
It's always hard to go after Ali. It's so fantastic and articulate. I just think, so in the same way that I would just think about the way that, Mark basically and I connected and how he was able to help us really amplify the work that we do and connected. When I first heard about Global Minnesota, I was like, that's kind of weird. That's kind of odd, but I love the fact that it had global and Minnesota in the same title. So I always say that the work locally can be strengthened by connecting globally, and that's the only way. Like I can only think globally, even though I'm from the Ivory Coast. Like I said, I'm from so many parts of the world. We're global citizens in the end. And this pandemic has really pushed us to realize that there's no other way than to connect and think globally. And one of the introduction that Mark has done, and Mark, I promise you that Joseph did not pay for me to say that, but we're partnering with a fantastic person that Mark put us in touch with, who is really trying to disrupt the private equity market and models, and which when I met him and I heard of his vision, I really fell in love with the work that he was doing. And so we're partnering with the company called Belgata to really create this an investment portal. We will be one of many others on an international level, and where international investors can come and meet, some of these high caliber, promising entrepreneurs, and really, like I said, disrupt those underinvestment and grim stats of the 1% or the 6% that we often see. So that infusement investment is key, because it will help to really foster and strengthen the ecosystem that people like Jean-Paul and Ali are trying to are doing it successfully, right? Building those ecosystems. So, but in many parts of the world, and parts that we least expect them to flourish, I like to see them emerge out of South Sudan. For example, we're working with a female-led enterprise that from Somalia, that's very innovative, that uses solar energy to bring about healthcare to patients in rural regions. So, and this is something that you never think of, this kind of innovation coming out of Somalia. Same thing, we're working with innovators out of South Sudan. So really disrupting those dominant narratives we have of these places that are, resonant in our minds, unfortunately, with war and misery. And like we saw, for example, the example of Rwanda, in less than 30 years, they're able to shift the dominant narrative of the genocide into a hub for innovation on a global scale. So I think that now is the time and to really think forward and then really think about everything that happened last year, not just in terms of the health crisis and the natural disasters, but also it brought to the fore all the issues around that. For example, racism is a health crisis, right? And not just because it disproportionately affects, Black populations and indigenous populations and people of color, but and it happened on a global scale, that the movements in the US had a repercussion around the world, and it really helped to foster a global community. So, I'm not trying to say that it was a positive thing, obviously, but we're saying how we can use the lesson learned from the pandemic. We can think about, connecting globally to, enforce our work locally. Like one of the other things, for example, we're doing further this month is really looking at, for example, facial recognition and AI and how the threat to our privacy, and with efforts that the city of New York has been leading. I'm not sure if you know, but they banned facial recognition and connecting it to other efforts, similar efforts of using and maximizing tech tools and opportunities in Nigeria, South Africa, and Brazil. And I think that, and then the way that we're thinking now globally is really it's revolutionary to me. So I'm hoping that we'll continue to collaborate with Minnesota and other partners. So yeah, thank you.
Well, we were committed to that vision, but I also want to note that one element of Global Black Youth is the notion that youth are leading globally, whether it's on gun violence, on racism, on climate, on entrepreneurship, on changing our relationships to each other and to the planet. And so I feel like there's a generational change that feels very global. And the rest of us are the beneficiaries of that leadership, but we're trying to find the ways to be partners in innovation, partners in the ways that Ali was describing and John Paul was, where we're being forced to think differently. But I feel like one of the aspects that I've been learning, and of course, Minnesota is in the middle of a continent, but there are many people who have come here, our indigenous people who've come from other parts 10,000 years ago, the people who came here early here from France and all of that, and the people who've come in the last decade or 2 or 3 from East and West Africa, from Latin America, from Asia. The world now is within this space all over. And Minnesota has been incredibly favored and incredibly, importantly enriched and engaged in the rest of the world. And so how we keep that up. I know that having the ability to, with Zoom and with digital technology, to connect has really been important. But I also know that there's still disparities globally that we need to be thinking about how we work those. And then we have the perception about youth, perception about Africa, perceptions about young people. And so in this opportunity today, World Health Day, we've been able to thread some of these pieces together. But what I'm looking forward to is the ability to take our conversation and to really amp it up. And I want to offer to all 3 of you the moments for last comments, giving us all some inspiration about the best ways that we might connect with each of you going forward. Audiences from the whole planet, how can we work together, taking all of us into a better place?
I would say that the easiest thing to remember is never be afraid to share the knowledge, because that's one thing that will stay alive even after your death. And I would just give that word as a conclusion.
Amen.
I'll go next real quick. So one of the things that we've been doing that has been quite successful for us is at United Capital is really mobilizing as many resources as possible and organizing them around global impact initiatives, right? So at the height of the pandemic, we put together an initiative called PRISM, PRISM, which stands for Pandemic Response Through Innovation and Scientific Methodology. And we were able to really connect with great leaders from multiple sectors, right? And to onboard them, right, in a very collaborative way to think strategically about how we could, come out of this crisis. So that was our initiative for healthcare. More recently, we've been working on telecom infrastructure, and we have 2 initiatives. One of them is called BEAM, right? BEAM, which stands for Broadband Equality for American Minorities. And that project is really, again, a coalition of multiple leaders, an open coalition. So we invite anybody that, who wants to partner with us or collaborate with us, or even, help scale, broadband solutions for, minorities here in the US. So we were very open, and we invite anybody to use this platform. It's very early. We're still structuring everything. But the key here is, again, empowering locals, communities, local stakeholders, from the corporate, from the government, from the, private equity, venture capital sectors, and obviously from the entrepreneurship ecosystem. At a much global scale, we're doing the same, in the energy level. We have several, portfolio companies, but also several, independent, collaborators collaborators, big industry leaders from Europe, from the US as well, and from Africa, working together to solve the energy crisis around the world with renewable energy. Operated by my co-founder Bashir out of Canada, and also by Marley, who's heading a company in renewable energy operating in Africa. And on the telecom scale as well, we're doing the same. So the key here, the pattern that we have is let's work together, let's collaborate, let's find a way to really take the best of what each one of us has to offer, and push an impact strategy that would really have an inclusive component reaching local communities. So those platforms for us have been key, and they are all open. We, like I said, we're very unstructured when it comes to those initiatives. The key here is to onboard as many collaborators as possible, and obviously Zoom has been a tremendous help for all of us. But to your point, Mark, what happens when you go to places where broadband is a challenge, right? Where connectivity is a challenge? How do you onboard those local leaders? That's why for us, having a foot in the actual telecom infrastructure ecosystem is very key, right? Because, like I said, this is just the bare bone layer. It enables additional opportunities for all of us to connect with remote collaborators in so many places. So we're very open, and we're also very early. This is a very small organization. We have 5 general partners. We are fortunate that one of them is, the Prince of Jordan, who came in as a co-founder. Prince Abbas was a Jordanian American, and the rest of the team is here in the US and in Canada and across Africa. So at the core, we're a very small team, but we were able to really scale and have or drive some sort of impact through the help of different collaborators, by empowering them, but by also welcoming them, right, and welcoming their ideas. And I think that's really key. Having that platform approach and nurturing an ecosystem when it comes to driving impact.
Great. Thank you so much. Niousha.
Thank you. I waited because I was like, the trend has been for Ali to go first, but I should have not gone after him again to close this. But I would just say that we saw last year, and we've been seeing throughout the years, young people have been demanding change, right? They've been hosting a lot of online campaigns, offline campaigns. They've been disrupting the way that we're doing things, and it's been fantastic, and I love that. So we have to kind of own that generational change. We have to really pass it on to the young generation, but especially to those young generations that are overlooked and underutilized, underinvested in. And just to think about the African continent that has the largest young population in the world, followed by Latin America, we're missing out. So what I would say to especially big corporations, but also large organizations, we can think about DEI efforts. It's nice, but as a person of color, I always feel a bit insulted when I hear DEI, because I feel like they're doing me a favor. Like, oh yeah, we have this policy. Now we have, 2 people of color on our board or in our staff. And it's like, yeah, but am I supposed to thank you for that? It's not enough. It's very superficial. We have to really disrupt that. That's very nice, but these are baby steps. And we're in 2021. We're beyond baby steps. We have to embrace that change in a much more drastic way. We have to think about missed opportunity. So even if we don't really care, but we don't really see the value of tapping into that knowledge that's being produced by the most overlooked populations around the world, in this case, Black youth, especially in the global South, we have to think about this. We're missing out on money. We're thinking about the largest population in the world in the African continent, second, Latin America, that are driving innovation and the different types of innovation that we're completely missing out on, that we can be gaining money, we can be gaining knowledge, and it's going to be a much more prosperous effort forward. So that's what I would say. And again, and not because from a sociological, kind of like fluffy way of thinking about narratives, but if we want to really achieve the SDGs, like for real this time, not like the Millennium Goals that we failed at, we have to disrupt the dominant narratives. We have to change the way that we think about the African continent, Latin America, people of color in general. Because if we continue to underinvest into young, founders, especially, or innovators, entrepreneurs, young leaders of colors, we're going to completely fail at society and the way that we're doing things and continue into the same trend of inequality and disaster that we're going forward. So that would be my last message.
Thank you so much, Jean-Paul, Ali, Niousha. Look forward to finding all these exciting ways to work together. We have many things to change, many things to do, but we have the opportunity because we have the possibility of connecting and helping each other be better at this connection going forward. Thank you again for being part of World Health Day 2021, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Goodbye now.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Goodbye. Thank you for having us.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.